a relatively simple process. I'm going to introduce the nominator for each of the Hall of Fame inductees. They'll come up, talk about the inductees, and then the inductees will come up. And we'll take a picture in the middle there. So, first on our list is Elliot White. His nominator is Liz White, his daughter, the Executive Vice President and Assistant Publisher of the Record Journal in Connecticut. So, Liz.
Hi, everyone. Tonight, I'm extremely excited to be introducing my dad as a Hall of Fame inductee. For 38 years, Elliot White has been the definition of what a family-owned newspaper company leader should be. He is the president and publisher of the Record Journal Publishing Company, now a 150-year-old company, and he's the fourth generation.
The pleasure also at the Record Journal, more recently to work with many talented journalists and passionate newspaper managers, most notably Dave Lucy and Tim Ryan. I'm excited that at the Record Journal we have a strong management team that has made the changes that put us in a good position to succeed for many years to come. What we do every day is important for our local communities and essential for a strong democracy. I am pleased and proud of our accomplishments as we shift the leadership to the next generation. Thanks again to all the nice people in my industry, my company, and my family. I thank you.
I should have been clearer. You should come up first for the trophy. Take the picture. That's my fault. Plus, I can't go anywhere without these. Okay. Our next recipient is Marcia Green. Her nominator, Tom Ward, the owner and publisher and founder of the Valley Breeze in Rhode Island.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, I can tell you, on Marcia, for Marcia. Where do I start? I suppose it was on Annie Nelson's golf course, sold off for a 1980s subdivision. I was a photographer. Marcia Green was a stringer for the Woonsocket Call. She soon after left and got a reporting job at the Pawtucket Times, where she would become city editor and reporter and report and lead a team of reporters on the sad episode of A Mayor Gone Bad. From his arrest, trial, and introduction to federal prison, Marcia led her team, and readers knew everything. For me, the second time was the charm, when in January 1996, I showed up at her door with my idea for a little hometown newspaper. She accepted the low-paid job and got to work, at first writing from my living room floor with the family computer. Jamie Quinn, the ad guy and business partner, got the big artsy Macintosh. It was all we had. For 21 years now, Marcia has been the heart of the Valley Breeze, even as we've grown to 5 editions, delivering more than 62,000 free papers across northern Rhode Island every week. For this award, I reached out to several people to support her nomination, including Lieutenant Governor and former Cumberland Mayor Dan McKee. Dan, who has known Marcia for 25 years, wrote, "I've seen Marcia demonstrate bold leadership and heartfelt compassion each and every day during her time as a journalist. I've always admired her dedication to taking the time to cover stories of great importance and interest to the communities her paper reaches." Marcia also made friends like Craig Johnson. Craig is one of those perfect letters to the editor writers. He writes seldom, the topics are important, and he signs them the Cranky Yankee. He wrote about his shared love with her of historic preservation and the importance of all of it. He also wrote of her reporting, quote, stories of her encounters with our stinkers and bullies of all dimensions, from the nastiest of lawyers to some of our most devious and deceitful public officials, to the jerks, my call, of our local union, who subjected her to catcalls and intimidation for simply appearing at public meetings to report on their foolish behavior. She stood up to all of them. As an aside, any of you folks who might think that town meetings are like the Norman Rockwell freedom of speech, yeah, right. So thank you, Marcia, for all you have done for all of us in our shared hometown, and for the tens of thousands of people who will never say thank you for your hard work. I'm proud that the New England Newspaper and Press Association has chosen to honor you tonight. As a friend and colleague, I will always be grateful to you for making the Valley Breeze the success it has become under your newsroom leadership. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. This is a humbling honor for me, and I hope that my husband, Alan, and my Valley Breeze staff, and especially my publisher, Tom Ward, all understand that they share this with me. I started my career in the mid-'70s at the Beverly Times on the North Shore with a typewriter and a pot of rubber cement. Those were the days of real cut and paste. And I think others here tonight share that memory. Across the newsroom, the teletype dinged with wire stories. We drove to City Hall to check to see if agendas had been posted on a real bulletin board. Photos were developed in the darkroom and then cropped with a grease pencil. I could go on and on about the good old days, but my point here is that the tools today are vastly better, but we write the same stories. We continue to write those same stories that touch everyday life. At the Valley Breeze, we were doing hyperlocal before the word was invented. Boy, it's not glamorous to sit around the second floor city council chamber while the Boy Scouts are being recognized and tax abatements are being approved. But the decisions that sometimes follow can change the landscape of a town forever. You can hang out in the State House if you choose, but I'd rather tell people about the rezoning for a shopping mall or plans for relocating the animal shelter. I think that's important work, and I've been happily dedicated my career to that. It seems only right to mention the names of several mentors in my life who aren't here, likely will never hear about this shout out, but no one gets too far in this craft without someone taking the time to offer them advice and help. They include for me Jack Thompson, a Journal Bulletin bureau chief who taught journalism at URI. And every week he took the time to critique the campus's Good 5-cent cigar newspaper that I helped edit. Jim Foodie, who hired me onto the Beverly Times and let me cover the Ipswich clamming industry, and to write the story that poked fun at a local author, John Updike. Bob McNamee, an editor at the Pawtucket Times and later a Projo Wire editor, who used to go over my stories line by line, out loud, explaining for everyone within earshot how I could have written it better. Important to me, too, was the influence of the late Jim Barron, who some of you may remember. Also in that newsroom was Kevin O'Connor. We had a pact back in the early 1990s that we joked a lot about. We knew we were covering a crooked Pawtucket mayor. First one to know he was taken out of City Hall in handcuffs had to call the other. Well, that never happens, does it? Except one day it did. Kevin called. and my sons, Nate and Alex, were here tonight. Were quickly stashed at a neighbor's house so I could run back to work, and boy, did the fun start then. Finally, I thank Tom Ward. He was a college biology major who was born knowing the essence of a great story was all about just people living their lives. I have been more than honored to carry the news of our Northern Rhode Island communities, and I'm grateful for a career to be paid as a storyteller. I thank you all once more for this extraordinary honor.
Our next honoree is Martin Langeveld. His nominator is Frederick Ruckberg, the president of the New England Newspapers, Inc. in Massachusetts.
Thank you. I am so honored and thrilled to be part of this profession. I am the newest journalist, if I am a journalist, among you all. I've been in this business since May 2nd. And now we're all enemies of the people. So I don't know what I brought to you, but I apologize. It is a thrill to be able to introduce Martin Langeveld. Unlike the others who are going into the Hall of Fame tonight, Martin has earned his way in twice because he has a long and distinguished career as a member of the profession, starting as a salesperson, working his way all the way up through the ranks of business side of New England newspapers, became the publisher back in the 90s, and then finally worked his way to publish in Vermont, one of our papers. He retired. In fact, he wrote a blog called News After Newspapers. And he was happily retired when I got this idea that the Berkshire Eagle, a storied old wonderful newspaper, could return to local ownership and control. And so I went to talk to Martin, and he helped myself and my partners, who wish they were here tonight, Bob Wilmers, Hans Morris, and Judy Lipsey. And Judy Lipsey is the widow of Stan Lipsey, the longtime publisher of the Buffalo News. But Martin stood by us. When I first went to talk to him, he said, "This is crazy. Don't do it. Save your money. Go out and do something else." But I didn't listen, and fortunately for our community, I didn't. If you are going to start a newspaper, or if you're going to start any entity, you would want a leader who has great intelligence, honesty, fortitude, and a calm sense of purpose. And that describes Martin Langeveld. He took over as acting publisher in July when our inherited publisher resigned unexpectedly. And on one day, November the 1st of this year, we introduced 3 new design papers, 3 new dailies, newly designed. We made the papers bigger. This is kind of contrary to the industry. We made the papers heavier. We also went online live with 2 new front-end systems, all at one day. This all happened on November the 1st of 2016. I was too new to know this, how ridiculously stupid this was. But we did it with just equanimity all the way through, and that's because of the firm and steady leadership that Martin Langeveld brought to us. So the communities that are served by New England newspapers, I believe, are being served better today and will be served better in the future by having a strong community newspaper. And that is in large part a result of the second part of Martin's career. So it is with great pride that I introduce to you a dear friend, and someone who's given me a chance to live my dream, Martin Langfeld.
Well, thank you very much. It really is an honor. Fred just said that he got into this probably a few years ago, never having thought about being a newspaper owner, but I got into this business kind of accidentally myself. Back in 1978, I went to see Pete Miller, who was the longtime editor and publisher of the Berkshire Eagle. And some of you may remember him. He's a guy that should be in this Hall of Fame. He was a real legend. And I went to see him if he would, to see if he would be interested in supporting a little business venture that I was thinking about. And so I went to the Eagle. Pete invited me to just come and talk to him. And I come into this room, and there's 8 different, newspaper people, managers, editors, ad guys, whatever, all sitting there. And I had this interview, and at the end of it, they said, why don't you just come and work for us? And you can do that business idea on the side. So the job was sales and marketing for Upcountry, which was a newsprint tabloid supplement that the Eagle had put together and had kind of syndicated out to a lot of other newspapers around New England. In fact, I think Elliott, the Meriden paper had Upcountry, and it went to about 20 different newspapers. And so it really was a great experience for a guy who knew nothing about the newspaper business. I got to go to the inside of these 20 different newspapers, large and small, and I learned a lot more than I would have if I just stayed in one place. And so that experience helped me a lot during the next 30 years in the business. So skipping to the far end, I left newspapers in 2008, but I kept track of the industry by writing about it first for my own blog, the Snooze After Newspapers, and then I got picked up by Neiman Lab, and I got involved in some projects at the University of Missouri, and then I get this call from Fred, who, Fred didn't mention this, but he was a longtime judge in Berkshire County, and judges have to retire in Massachusetts at a certain age. I won't say what age that might be. And he needed something to keep him busy, and he said that some people he knew wanted to buy the Berkshire Eagle. And he's right. I said, why would you want to do a thing like that? And I tried to talk them out of it. But the long and the short of it was that he was serious, and he persuaded me to come on board, first during the acquisition process and then as acting publisher for about 5 months. And I really must say that after being out of the business for a while, then coming back into it, it was really a pleasant surprise to discover that there really was still a lot of energy, a lot of dedication, and a lot of creativity, and just a great crew of people to come and work with. And the new owners added to this vision, or added a new vision and a fresh commitment to the communities that they were serving, and most importantly, the resources to help to rebuild this enterprise. So the chance to do this, to be involved in this transition, really turned out to be one of the most personally rewarding things that I've ever done. And now you've capped it with this induction into the Hall of Fame, which I never really expected, and it's a great honor. I thank you very much. I thank Fred for being the instigator here, And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my wife Beverly, who stood by me for all these years through the ups and downs of my newspaper career, and without whom I certainly wouldn't be here tonight. Thank you very much.
Our next inductee is Bob Ryan. No, it's not. I'm sorry. It's Candace Page. And her nominator is Paula Roudley, who's the publisher and co-editor of 7 Days in Vermont.
Candace Page was the only editor who would give me the time of day when I sauntered into the Burlington Free Press 32 years ago without an appointment, looking for my first full-time journalism job. She read my cover letter on the spot and informed me with a disapproving look, "You spelled savvy wrong." I was not savvy. I offered some lame excuse, but Candy was not buying it. The error, she explained, suggested that I was not careful enough to be a reporter there. Her criticism stung at the time, but in truth, it was incredibly generous. By explaining why I was disqualified, she gave me the information I needed to improve, and hopefully one day prove her wrong. At that point, Candy, Vermont-raised and Brown-educated, had been at the Free Press for 5 years, after stints at the Providence Journal and UPI. She had already worked her way up from City Hall reporter to features editor. 3 years later, when I finally did get a job at the Free Press, Candy was running the editorial page. She was never my editor, unfortunately, but that didn't stop her from reading and commenting on my stories. I remember one ladies' room encounter in which I got a lesson in the proper use of partial quotes. Candy continued to offer advice after I started my own weekly newspaper, which competes directly with the Free Press in 1995. As 7 Days grew over the decades, she served as Free Press State House bureau chief, assistant managing editor, and managing editor before leaving all that for the trailblazing environmental beat. She worked for 8 years. I watched with admiration and some envy as she broke story after story about endangered species, the science of algae blooms, the forest economy. Quote, her deeply informed reporting on the natural world guided civic debate about protecting Vermont's heritage of land and water, especially Lake Champlain, wrote Christine Chinland, now a managing editor at the Boston Globe, in nominating Candy, her fellow colleague at UPI. That contribution will be felt for decades. Candy's editor at the time, Mike Killian, who is now the news director at the Cincinnati Enquirer, added, quote, it's important to understand the extent Ms. Page would go to get an important story right, he wrote in his letter for Candy. After Tropical Storm Irene devastated central Vermont in August 2011, she spent a few months in one town so she could understand the disruption in human terms. She structured her 3-part series as a before, during, and after, with a central portion describing the flooding in such detail. A reader could all but hear the roar of the rushing water. As has been the case throughout her career, Ms. Page could write authoritatively because she would take her reporting to the nth degree. In this case, she walked the path of the floodwaters, finding debris along the way so she could describe precisely how and where a stream had jumped its banks. Candy's thorough and insightful stories distinguished the Free Press during those years. She was prolific and good. We'd see each other at the downtown Burlington YMCA, where we both tried to work out regularly. And although she was fully committed and loyal to the Free Press and won dozens of awards for her work, she always had some observation for me about a 7-day story she liked or one that could have been stronger. She was reading us, the ultimate compliment, and also shared advice on recruiting and managing. While she laughed off my repeated attempts to hire her, Candy was clearly sympathetic to our mission, steering a locally owned newspaper through the shark-infested waters of modern media. Her interest in serving Vermont readers trumped journalistic tribalism. Candy retired in 2013, but she never stopped writing food and feature stories for the Free Press, and I never stopped trying to get her to work at 7 Days. It took a lot of coaxing, but Candy finally agreed to edit a news story. Even then, she called it an experiment and laid out all kinds of conditions. She didn't want to work weekends, would be unavailable for long stretches of time, wasn't sure this was a good idea, etc. I know now she was protecting herself from her own ferocious work ethic, as Christine accurately described it. The gene for that Yankee drive came from her newspaper-loving parents, Proctor and Ruth Page. Together, they owned and ran a weekly newspaper. Candy's dad handled the business side, while her mother, who died a few months ago, was in charge of all the editorial content. Ruth wrote, edited, and raised 3 children at a time when women in journalism were rare. Ruth had commentaries on Vermont Public Radio until she was 90. Like her late mom, Candy under-promises and over-delivers. Sorry. At 7 Days, she's taken on the toughest assignments, coached the weakest writers, worked crazy hours to accommodate them, and started attending our news meetings, her vast institutional memory in tow. When our political editor, Paul Heinz, was working on a big story last year about Senator Patrick Leahy, Candy remembered a bit of history that, if confirmed, would illustrate the hypocrisy of a senator who has been in Washington for 42 years. When Paul searched the archives on microfiche, he found that Candy was not only right, but she wrote the story in 1974. 43 years later, I feel incredibly fortunate to finally have the chance to work with this tireless woman who has ink in her blood and Slack, the latest messaging app on her iPhone. I know I'm not alone in my appreciation. Mike and Christine are celebrating here with us tonight, as are 7 Days reporters Terry Hollenbeck and Paul Heinz. And the 7 Days news team and the state of Vermont owed Candy a debt of gratitude. We're all better off for her comeback. It's such a pleasure to be here with Candy and her fans on the occasion of her induction into the New England Newspaper Hall of Fame. I can't think of another living Vermont journalist who is more deserving of the honor.
Well, I can't thank Paula enough for those encomiums, but I have to say, it just seems ridiculous to me. I'm sitting at this table with people who are so much better journalists than I ever was. I mean, Irene Wolowski, late of the Providence Journal, the smartest, most aggressive newspaper reporter I ever worked with. Chris Chinland, who started with me at UPI. I ended up at the Burlington Free Press. She ended up running the Boston Globe. Paul Heinz, who is the future of journalism in Vermont. Paula Routley, who has built an alternative newspaper at a time when newspapers are collapsing, not growing. Mike Killian, who is the best editor, possibly the only great editor I've ever worked with. And here I stand. So I think I really appreciate everything that's been said, but I'm thinking maybe this is about longevity and the fact that I've lasted this long. So I did wanted to say a couple things, and this is what happens when you retire. You don't have a pen and you don't have a piece of paper, so I wrote my remarks on the back of Chris Chinland's grocery list and the back cover of a Visitor's Guide to Boston. So if they don't make sense, you understand why. So, I became a reporter in 1973, 74 during Watergate, when journalism was a cause and a calling, not just a job or a career. Holding government accountable was a heroic pursuit, not just to journalists, but to our audience at that time. And it was also, I believed, with all the passion that you have in your 20s, I believed in the importance of what I was doing. And it's not that that necessarily ever went away, but I do think that I was lulled when it comes to the mission of journalists in the 80s and the 90s, when we were one voice among many, and life in the United States was the same that it had always been. So I got into journalism at a time when Woodward and Bernstein were bringing down the president. I was covering the Narragansett Town Council, but nevertheless, I believed that my job was to speak truth to power, and the fact that the members of the Narragansett Town Council were taking the best beach cabanas for themselves seemed like, this was serving the greater cause of journalism. So I really like to think of tonight and this honor for me, which I am deeply appreciative of, is a way of honoring the values that we all feel about our mutual calling, the importance of reporting the facts, casting a skeptical and questioning eye on authority of all kind, and speaking, as I said, speaking truth to power. And I certainly hope that that's a cause that I have served in my time, and it's reaffirming to understand that there are people here who still want to do that. And the final thing I want to say is I'd like to thank my sister, who was the first victim of my scorched earth approach to life and journalism and managed to survive. She doesn't have that high an opinion of journalists necessarily, but she helped turn me into the person that I am. So thank you very much, and keep carrying the flame. Thanks.
Okay, the suspense is gone. Now it is Bob Ryan. And to introduce him is Mike Donahue, a colleague, a fellow sports writer, executive director of the Vermont Press Association, and adjunct professor at St. Michael's College in Vermont.
Thanks very much, and I'm fortunate because Candy was my boss at one point, and it's good to see her, and Martin is on the Vermont Press Association board, so it's good to be here. Bob Ryan, enough said. A byline or a column by Bob Ryan has always been a must-read in the Boston Globe. For 44 years, he worked there full-time, and for the last 5, he's sort of been in this semi-retirement mode like some of us get to. It's been an honor to read him and to know him, the quintessential American sports writer. The National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association in Massachusetts, their members, voted him the state's top sports writer 4 times in 1997, 2001, 2006, and 2010. The full NSSA membership nationwide voted Bob the National Sports Writer of the Year 4 times, 2000, 2007, 2008, 2009. Bob received the ultimate honor from the NSSA when he was elected to be inducted into the National Hall of Fame in 2011. Bob is also the winner of the Red Smith Award from the AP Sports Editors in 2015. The Basketball Hall of Fame presented him the Kurt Gowdy Award. But let's talk a little bit more about Bob and his great gentle kindness, charitable work that he and Elaine do and their family. And I've been fortunate to know Bob. He's been a friend of the New England Newspaper and Press Association. We've been fortunate enough to get him here to attend a couple of winter conventions, to be keynote speakers from time to time on sports sessions. He may write for New England's biggest and best newspaper, but his words of advice for the college student wanting to join the profession, all the way up to the writers who have been there for 20 years or more, are always spot on. He is caring, sharing kind of guy. He has always been willing to share his knowledge and his know-how for those coming into the profession. He has helped to improve many of us in the profession. I was fortunate enough to be the president of the National Sportscasters Association, got to serve on the board with Bob, and he'll never forgive me because I threw him under the bus and nominated him to later be vice president, which meant he would be president, which he is now of the national group. When the NEMPA Hall of Fame, the NEMPA Hall of Fame recognizes sports writers, it is fair to say that Bob's appearance on national television as a frequent panelist on ESPN shows, the sports reporters around the horn, filling in on, pardon the interruption, has only increased his faithful reading audience. So I'd like to salute Bob. He has covered just about every sport in Boston. The Celtics are his longtime favorite beat, probably. He loves NCAA basketball. He's been a general sports columnist. He's covered Super Bowls, Olympics, just about every sport that you can think of playing. And one of his colleagues, he had several nominating letters, but one of his colleagues might have said it best: his national awards are many, but having gone to school at Boston College, having worked his entire life and raised his family in Massachusetts, I know being accepted into the Hall of Fame will be akin to the Celtics' overtime victory for him. With that, Bob Ryan.
There they are. Okay. Marcia, I can well remember there were actually fistfights among the desk people over those paste pots. You do not exaggerate the nature of that great time. I like to tell people I started in the Western Union era, which I did in 1968, and now to where you can, write and compose and send your story right here. So I've been fortunate to span that whole era. I am a child of newspapers. When I was young, my father might take me to a high school basketball game, as he frequently did on a Friday night, and I could not wait till Saturday morning, because then I could read about the game. And until I read about the game in the paper, it was not authenticated or validated in my head. Now, most 7-year-olds aren't like that. Most 70-year-olds aren't like that, and I now qualify at both ends of the spectrum, so I can testify that, but that's the way I was wired. I read Monday through Thursday, 6 newspapers a day. We get the Times and the Globe at home. I then have reserved for me at my local place the Herald, the USA Today, the Post, and the Daily News. On Friday, we get the Wall Street Journal. My son long ago put me onto the idea of their weekend entertainment section. Of course, now Rupert has very graciously given us a daily sports section. And of course, on Saturday is the great book review section, and so that's another one. And then the Globe and the Times on Sunday. I cannot live without newspapers. So that's who I am. And though I now am known for anybody out there in the great beyond, under 40 or maybe even under 50, because of my presence on television, I can assure you that when I get up in the morning and look in the mirror, I see a writer, a newspaper writer. And that's why I'm glad that my family is here with me tonight. Not only my wife, Elaine, who has been through everything with me for over, we're married 48 years in May, and we've known each other since we were freshmen at BC, and we have this raging family argument as to whether we met the second or third day. I say the second, she says the third, so she's probably right. And but my daughter-in-law Kate is here, and my grandchildren Connor, Jack, and Amelia are here, and I'm glad that they can absorb all this simply because they have only known me. They know they can turn on the television on so often and see Papa, but this is who I am. To be among you people as a newspaper writer. The television thing is wonderful. It's been great at every level, but it's not who I am. I'm a newspaper writer. And along those lines, the opportunity that I was given and the luck, and you know, we all know that it's so much a matter of being in the right place at the right time, and you can't control the circumstances that you were placed in. And my circumstances were so incredibly fortuitous that I was given an opportunity to have an internship at the Boston Globe. And when I was at BC, as Mike alluded, and of course in those days there were 3 papers in Boston, each with an evening edition, so in essence there were 6, but there were 3 companies, and that of course was the Globe and the Evening Globe, the Herald and the Traveler, the Record and the American. But I easily identified as an undergraduate at BC that the Globe was where I wanted to be. My dream was to write for the Boston Globe, and I was able to get that opportunity through the auspices of Boston College, and that was the greatest break I could have ever had professionally, because the Boston Globe, and I hope I'm not offending anybody here, but the Boston Globe was a writer's paper, not an editor's paper. And by that, of course, I mean that we were given the freedom to be creative. We, all the young writers, all the writers, I started on the same day, June 10th, 1968, as Peter Gammons, a name that I hope will be familiar to many of you. And we were given a chance to stretch our journalistic wings by one of the great editors in the history of 20th century journalism, Tom Winship. Tom Winship, who really was not a sports-minded person at all. If he knew anything, it was polo or maybe the yachts. But he recognized the value and the interest that sports and the hold and the grip that sports had in the city of Boston and in New England, and wanted his newspaper to have the best possible sports section to take advantage of that. And that's number. So he gave the sports department all the support that any sports editor would have wanted, but he set a tone for the entire newspaper, that creative writing, aggressive writing, and that you were totally allowed to write on whatever your beat happened to be it sports, be it politics, be it entertainment, be it environment, be it whatever it was, religion, whatever, from a point of view, because he respected the idea that you had something to say, you had a knowledge about your topic, and that therefore you had every right to write it from a point of view. You know, don't worry about objectivity. We all know that's a nonsensical word in journalism. It's about fairness. It's not about objectivity. It's about fairness, and it's about knowledge, and it's about dispensing the knowledge and the way you present your story. Well, all this came through with the Boston Globe. I was so grateful to have worked for them all those years, and the individual sports editors that gave me a chance to go out and indulge myself, really, frankly, and I want to name them just because they all should be named: Jerry Nason, Ernie Roberts, Dave Smith, Vince Doria, Don Squire, and my last editor, Joe Sullivan, who remains my editor because I am, in addition to 2 other people, at least on this honorary people tonight who are alleged to be retired, but we're still writing, aren't we, Marcia? Aren't we, Albert? We're all still writing because it's in our blood and we can't get away from it, and thank God they still want us. But Joe Sullivan was the perfect editor for me when I was going out almost 5 years ago to ease me into the retirement, and now he's welcomed me back into the fold. I write about, the agreement is 30 to 40 Sundays a year. So I'm still grateful to still be able to call myself a writer. And believe me, though I'm most known in the world now for television, the 4 most important words on my resume are "of the Boston Globe." And I am still totally proud of that and grateful. And, you know, we all know that our business is under siege and imperiled, and who knows what the future is going to be and what state of news, whether we'll even be a newspaper in 2050 as we know it. I don't know. I just know this, that I'm very grateful that I did it when I did it and where I did it. That's for sure. And we know today was a very dark day today. We know that President Bannon and Vice President Trump had a very nasty day today with what happened in that press conference. It scares you, and that's another matter entirely. And I just want to close by saying this. I am truly honored to be the only sports writer among these 6 people in the company of the true journalists that we should all admire, and I thank you very much for the honor.
And now we come to our final honoree, who Bob already mentioned, Albert Southwick. His nominator is Karen Weber, the editor of the Telegram and Gazette in Worcester.
Hello. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Al Southwick, an editorial writer, historian, and author who has made a profound impact on his community for well over a half-century. In his current weekly column for the Telegram and Gazette, he puts the news of the day in perspective. His commentary is not strictly a historical column. He tackles contemporary issues with an informed viewpoint, and he's popular with readers young and old. You can read a little bit about Al's career in your Hall of Fame program book. I'd like to read to you part of a nomination letter that Tony Similarides, the current editor of the editorial pages, wrote about Al. Tony says, and for this I need my glasses, Albert B. Southwick is a treasure, a man of letters who thinks and cares deeply, whose editorials and byline perspectives have appeared in the editorial pages of the T&G for over a span of more than 60 years. It is the T&G's privilege to be his home paper, the publication in which the vast bulk of his work has appeared, often as many as 3 editorials a day during his days as chief editorial writer. It was on the editorial pages of the Evening Gazette in 1953 that Al wrote an early condemnation of Senator Joe McCarthy of Wisconsin. It was written as an editorial, but there was so much internal disagreement, even President Eisenhower at the time was reluctant to speak out, that Al was told that it would be published as a bylined column instead, which it was. The response? Oh boy, Al recalled. People don't realize now what a hot issue it was. There was fury, to be sure, but also the appreciation of those moved by his words. 63 years later, Al's weekly column continues with the same honesty, clarity, curiosity, depth, and luminosity. It's almost beside the point that he remains an important contributor at age 96, except that if not the oldest, He certainly must be among the oldest active columnists for an American daily newspaper. It's not that Al Southwick, who is ageless in his writing, is the Tom Brady of American journalism. It's that Tom Brady is the Al Southwick of professional football. We get a lot of letters from readers about Al, and they're all very complimentary. Here's just one I have to share from a Paxton reader. She writes, "I can't go a block or turn a corner without seeing and knowing more about our city, and it's all in thanks to Al. His weekly Thursday column is a must-read." Al, I want to thank you very much for all you've given the Telegram and Gazette and their readers and all that you do. And from all of us, congratulations.
Can you hear me out there? Yes. Taking 5 minutes max. This is a very, yeah, thank you. This is a very singular honor, and it comes totally unexpected. Totally. I want to thank my editors, Karen Weber, and Tony Silveranis, who put my name up, and to the NBA for enrolling me in this really unusual honor. I thought I had moved past the timing point, and here it is. Now, I retired in 1985. So, let this be a warning to you. I don't know whether you plan to retire at 62 or 65 or 67. You probably have 30 or 40 years ahead of you. Some of you are going to hit 100. I guarantee it. Where's my This award has reminded me once again, I have been writing for newspapers and magazines for 75 years. My first article appeared in the Sunday Telegram, and my first article appeared in the Sunday Telegram in 1941. And I might just have continued my career there, but then he came Pearl Harbor, and everything was changed. For me, for the millions of people who served for the nation, for the world. And you cannot understand people like me unless you know something about World War II. I was a naval aviator. I was in the Navy for 4 years. I flew patrol bombers, both of the Atlantic and the Pacific. I was flying a load of bombs heading for Japan on
August 14, 1945, when the radio man came into the cockpit and said, "The Japs have surrendered." It was a moment to remember. I was lucky. I got through it without a scratch. Unlike our sister squadron, who was shot to pieces at Oval Canoa. 5 planes, 60 men gone forever, men I knew. But despite our difficulties in the war, no group of returning veterans ever was better treated than we were. We were given bonuses. I got a bonus of $200 from the state of Massachusetts. We were given special deals on mortgage payments. We were given the GI Bill of Rights. Under that, I went and got my master's degree in American history, and my wife, who was also a Navy veteran, got her master's degree in social work from Boston University. And we got affection and respect and praise of a grateful nation. That feeling has persisted right to the present, as the phrase, the greatest generation tells you. We didn't feel that way. We don't feel that way, but we were just a cross-section of America, but much appreciated. Enough war stories. I went back to the town General Gazette in 1952 and did it up 36 years later as chief editorial writer. Again, I was lucky. The Worcester newspapers were owned by 2 Worcester families. And it was a time when people made money from print journalism, which is getting harder and harder to do. Our publisher, George F. Booth, was also editor and owner of the papers, and a paid deal in Worcester payers, so we could count on reliable salaries and bonuses and a pretty good retirement deal. It was a paternalistic system, but it worked for us. My contrast, since I retired in 1985, the papers had changed hands 4 or 5 times, and now are partly owned by Japanese conglomerate. So 75 years ago, I was fighting Japan, now I'm being paid by them. Has it changed or not? In short, I've had a very satisfying career in a profession I love, providing facts and thought to our readers. Good journalism is more important than ever in this era of alternative facts, White House spin, and social media blatherings of misinformation and disinformation. Pursuing the truth and reporting it accurately is going to be a continuing challenge. Again, thank you so much.
Why don't we give a round of applause for all of the honorees again tonight? I just want to say, as a journalist, I'm honored to be in the same room as these, people who have been. It's not just longevity, although Al's is amazing, but it's achievement, it's dedication, it's passion, and it's what brings us all back, every day of the week. So thank you. Good night.